thank you very much for joining us today. We're very happy to have you both on. This should be a very exciting conversation. So without further ado, we have a very special guest on today that Professor Denninger will introduce. So without further ado, welcome Professor Denninger. Professor Denninger is an Emmy Award-winning television production executive and innovative educator who's produced live sports television from 6 continents and across the United States. He's a professor of practice at Syracuse University, where he was named Fall College Faculty Member of the Year for Excellence in Teaching in 2014. He was the founding director of the Sports Communications Graduate Program at Newhouse School, and he's created several new graduate and undergraduate level courses at Syracuse's alma mater. Professor Denninger, thank you very much for joining us today. Without further ado, I will now leave the call.
Thanks, Ben. I'd like to welcome everybody to the latest conversation in our Syracuse University Sports Business Conference Digital Series. This morning, we're joined by Mitchell Modell, President and CEO of Modell's Sporting Goods, America's oldest family-owned retailer of sports equipment. Modell was founded in 1889 by Morris Modell, and that was before basketball or volleyball had even been invented, before a decade before the first World Series, before there was an NFL, an NHL, an NBA, or even an NCAA. So Modell's was out there on the vanguard, if you will, and has been there for 130 years. Welcome, Mr. Modell.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
What principles were most important to your family as it grew and sustained over 130 years, in which sport and virtually everything else changed so much?
Really about 2 things. Always take care of your associates. If you take care of your associates or employees, as most people call them, they'll take care of the company. And always take care of your vendors and take care of your customers. And so our mission statement really is about listening, respecting, and responding to our associates, our vendors, and our customers. And, there was always a thing within our family to always give back to those people that are less fortunate than we are, and to really make a difference in every community in which every store is served.
What does that tell the community about your family and about your company when you do participate in these social responsibility programs, when you do give back?
You know what made us unique was being a family business. We always try to hire managers, assistants, store associates who lived in the area. So, understanding, in Little League, they only wear gray pants in this town. In another town, they can only wear white or black. Understanding, could you wear turf cleats or metal spikes? So it's really understanding the different nuances in every store in which we competed. And that's what made us special and unique.
Now, growing up with the name Modell, did you automatically become a sports fan?
You know what? When I read the question, I was trying to ask myself, was I a sports fan first, or knowing that we were in the sporting goods business? My father would always bring home a Franklin ball glove from a Little League ball glove. And he goes, look, I know you got a game this Saturday. Here are some cleats. Here's some Neatsford oil. In those days, we had Neatsford oil. You took a big softball, you wrapped it around in leather, you pounded the glove, broken the glove. Those were the most exciting times. But, I guess once we were really immersed in the business, our business, was really contingent on teams winning or teams losing, or traded players. I remember when Linsanity craze came into be, and we jumped all over it, printing T-shirts. We're the ones that came up with the expression. When I was in, Madison Square Garden, and we saw sign Linsanity, I took a picture, sent it to our printer, got the NBA to approve it, and the rest was history. So it's really jumping on the bandwagon of, the Yankees' successes back in, 98, 99, 2000, where it was like an automatic, and basically that's what really happened to our business. When you think about it, we haven't had a championship winner since 2012. That's like 8 years, where every year, either it was the Mets, during the Subway Series, or the Yankees were in the championship, or it was the Giants, or it was the Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl, or it was the Patriots winning the Super Bowls, or the Celtics winning the NBA championships. Since we were a Northeast company, we always had action in every state, whether it be Philly, Boston, Washington Nationals, winning the World Series. So every year we always had a little play. The Capitals winning the Stanley Cup. I could just go back and repeat all those different things. But when it's dry and the team is horrible, you don't want to be in the sporting goods business. At least not in the license business, I should say.
How important is it to have a transcendent star? So the root of the question, was it for the Knicks to trade away Jeremy?
So, trades are so important. They could always go backwards on you. Tom Brady being traded to Tampa, we had to take huge markdowns to get rid of the stuff. In Philadelphia, where they're such fanatics, when a Michael Vick got traded or when he got into trouble, we wound up sending $100 jerseys for $5. People were using it for Duraflame logs in the fireplace. So when a team goes bad or players get traded and they feel the fans feel like they're violated, you got to get rid of it. But when they make a big trade, think about what happened with the Brooklyn Nets when they hired Garnett, Durant, all those things. It creates excitement. With all the craziness with the Washington Redskins, changing the name. The one thing that's going to be good is that everybody has got to get a brand new jersey, T-shirt, hat, sweatshirt. And so it breathes new life into that category.
I for a number of years, I went to the Washington Touchdown Club dinner. I was part of the panel that selected the annual Dial Award for Student Athletes of the Year. And they always stressed the garnet and gold. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, just drop Redskins and call them the Washington Garnet and Gold, and you can stick with all those great colors, which people have gotten used to. There was a guy who showed up at that dinner every year, Mitch, who wore a garnet and gold tuxedo.
I love it.
And it was obviously made when he was a little bit slimmer. So it was kind of a round garnet and gold tuxedo by that time.
They're crazy. Those fans are fanatics. Again, when the quarterback, I forgot who it was, he got injured. They played him about 5 years ago. Griffith.
Yes. Yeah. RG3.
RG3. I mean, we went through more RG3 T-shirts and jerseys. You couldn't get them. They were on allocation. And then when he got hurt and he got traded, we couldn't give them away. Right. So that's the nature of being the license business.
Now, what insights and lessons can you share with students from your experience running a business in the sports industry?
Well, I think the most important thing is really the relationships. We have great personal relationships with every commissioner. We have great relationships with all our suppliers, one of trust and respect. We represented about 40% when there was a hot market. A hot market meaning Giants go to the Super Bowl, they got the NFC Championship game leading up to the Super Bowl. We were 40% of the business being done. And we were the number one leader in the license business. No matter if you had Dick's there, where you had Fanatics, we were always the big player in license. And so to me, it's all about cultivating relationships, making sure that if you have a problem, you need goods, you could talk to someone in authority, CEO, commissioner, president of a company. That's really the big takeaway. Always have relationships with the salesman, but more important, always have the relationship at the top. Anytime there was a change to the top in any company, I'd pick up the phone, introduce myself. Let's have coffee, let's have lunch, let's have dinner, let's get a chance to know each other. And that's what I really stress Everybody does in any business, whether it be sports business, could be manufacturing, could be, we're all in the sales business, right? We all have customers, no matter what flavor. Could be a dentist, you have a customer, they're a client. But at the end of the day, how do you embrace them? How do you relate to them? And those things are critically important.
It takes a certain amount of courage to initiate communications. Say, when you say to pick up the phone call, were you born with that courage, or was that something that you had to develop in, yes, I've got to make this phone call and I can't be worried about what they might or might say. I can't be worried if they're going to say no. How did you develop that within yourself?
My father always said, if you don't ask, you don't get. The worst that happens, they don't take the call. The worst that happens, they won't want to meet with you. The worst that happens, they don't want to deal with you. I mean, that's the worst. But suppose they really embrace that. And people, anytime there's a change, someone gets promoted, always send out an email, always wrote a handwritten note. Congratulations. It was only a question of time when you were going to get promoted. We'll do whatever we can to help you, support you in those efforts. Those are the little things that you don't read about in school or hear about in school that you have to do as business people. Those are the things that people remember. Anybody that gets fired in a company, they get let go. I call that person the next day, the day after, for weeks upon weeks. How you doing? How can I help you with your search? How your emotions? Because it's like anything else. Everyone forgets. Oh, guy's no longer president. He can't help me anymore. But I know that this person, this gal, this guy will wind up in another job somewhere else. Most of the time we help them get the job. They use me as a reference. They know they got a really strong contact Rolodex list, and it works.
What was it like being part of an episode of Undercover Boss?
Fascinating. To this day, I mean, I just came from the drugstore, and they go, were you under that boss program? I mean, literally a half hour ago. I mean, I go on airlines. I get approached by the pilots and no matter where I go, I'd say a few times a week minimum, people always ask about the episode. It was life-changing, absolutely life-changing. Going undercover, not knowing who I was, people not knowing who I was, except for, Jimmy in Connecticut, in Milford, Connecticut, that busted me, saw my disguise. But it was just things that really, we made an incredible difference in our company by changing a lot of the operational procedures, a lot of the things in the distribution center that we changed. Task was the biggest one. I didn't realize how many items we had a ticket at the store level, right? So we're telling all our associates, really give great customer service. Talk to the customers, wait on them, except we buried them with putting security tags on, ticketing the merchandise, hanging the merchandise. All those things went away immediately. We laid it off on our vendors so that we could take that precious time and really deal with our customers in the store.
So you'd recommend that, whether or not it's on television or not, you would recommend that kind of connection with your employees on a semi-regular basis?
Well, I live in the stores. I visit every store minimum once a year. A lot of stores twice a year, 3 times a year, 4 times a year. That's where the wars are won. If you want to find out how do you solve problems, or how do you have a better shopping experience with your customers, people in the home office aren't going to tell you. The people on the firing line, the cashiers, usually my greatest asset in terms of information. Was though it's when a customer shops the store, didn't find what she wanted, or didn't like the service, or whatever the situation might be, or things that, wow, I really love the store, you upgraded it, it feels so much nicer. You get the good, the bad, and the ugly when you go to the stores and really talk to our associates as well as our customers.
Now, you've answered this question to a certain extent, but what would you say are the best ways to maintain a positive working environment in a company?
I always refer to the Christmas tree. My brother, Michael, may he rest in peace, died in 2001 in April at the age of 48. And he, If you looked at him, how I spoke to him about on Undercover Boss, I mean, he was the person that, you know, the rah-rah type guy. He was the person that people would go to, be 100% accessible to. You know, I was more of pounding the pavement, and, you know, I still have the Christmas tree. In fact, I might even still have it here. He gave, I'm going to, hold on one second. I might have it. I'm going to show it.
Excellent. Okay. This is great. Visual aids. That's a heck of an office chair there, isn't it? You got to
No,
be.
you know what? Oh, the Yankees. Yeah, so I thought I had it. But anyway, I sent it because I'm in the process of writing a book, All In. And one of the chapters was about Michael, where he gave me a Christmas tree. And he goes, let me tell you the difference between you and me. Let's say there were 99,000 bulbs in the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. I'll focus on the one bulb that's out, right? I want to fix it. That bulb's out. How is it out? How come it's out? He would focus and celebrate the 98,999 lights that were on. Let's celebrate the success where I was focused on the negative and a creative negative culture. And so, you know, that's one of the life experiences. He always said to me, when you meet with somebody in the company, you have a conversation, could be in a store, could be in the distribution center, could be in a hallway, could be a regular meeting. How do the people leave the meeting? Better, worse, or the same? If they felt better, walking out energized, then you're a true leader. If they walked out with their head between their legs, you beat the living daylights out of the person, okay? He's like wasted for the rest of the day. You know, those are the choices you have. And those are the type of leadership styles that as young people, you gotta be really positive. You gotta be positive about the people you work with and the people that work with you.
The worst feeling, I think, leaving a meeting is leaving confused, not sure what does that mean, where are we going? It wasn't clear. But if you, as you said, if you have a positive sense of, okay, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, this is what we're celebrating, these are the things, then you do feel energized. I think the worst thing you could ever do is leave people confused, right?
Right. Well, you know, and it's at meetings, very, very important. This is what I call the Mitchellism.
Okay.
Due dates. Who's responsible? When are they getting back to you? What's the time frame? You have to hold people accountable. You hold people accountable, you get better results.
Now, you've just gone through a pretty difficult spring here. What were the factors that contributed to Modell's filing for Chapter 11 this past March?
So last year, it was March 11, 2019, at 10:45 in the morning, I get an 11:15 in the morning, I get an email from the Wall Street Journal. Mr. Modell, we're doing an article on your company. We hear that you overexpanded. We hear that you hired a restructuring company. We hear that you're looking at all alternatives, including filing for bankruptcy. We heard that you overexpanded and business has been tough. Could you comment? You have by 1 o'clock. I called my public relations firm. I said, listen, I'm dealing this thing one-on-one. He goes, no, you're not. I go, what do you mean, no, I'm not? We're going to let the article run. I go, you can't let the article run. They said that we're filing for bankruptcy. Once this thing is, is out in the marketplace, whether it's real, not real, I'm dead. Look, we're in this business 40 years. We're going to react to this thing. They're going to misinterpret what you say. And I said, listen, I'm taking the call. I know how to control the narrative. This is not my first rodeo. And they go, well, if you do it, we're resigning from the account. I said, excuse me? He goes, that's how strong we feel about it. I go, you know what? If you feel that strongly about it, I won't comment. 5 o'clock comes. I'm getting emails, calls, texts. I got shut off by every insurance company. I got shut off by every factor. 300 of my vendors all shut me down. And they said, we're going to wait till you file bankruptcy until we start shipping goods. I go, I'm not filing. I go, I have no plans on filing. Well, we've seen this drill before. We've seen it with Sports Authority, Bob stores, EMI, City Sports, MC Sporting Goods, Sports Authority, all in the last 6 months. We cannot take a chance. So with that, I spent the next 30 days of my life on the phone with vendors saying, listen, if you don't sell me, you will never be allowed in my company ever again. We're done. And so, again, we're back to the relationships. Because of my real strong relationships with every CEO and every president I did business with, and I said, I'm putting 6.8 million cash of my own money. I'm now the #1 largest creditor. Tell me, why do you think I'm filing? So that calmed the waters down. And that was last year, 2019. We go through 2019. We worked with our landlords. They gave us certain concessions. They deferred rent payments. The whole industry really worked with us. What happened? The warmest winter we ever had in 2019. All the teams were lousy. Not one team went to the playoffs. Thanksgiving. It was the warmest Thanksgiving ever. We bought tons of closeouts in license. We bought 50 off merchandise from NFL, NHL, MLB. Sweatshirts that were normally 100, we sold for 50. Normally 50, sold for 25. T-shirts, normally 20, sold them for 10. Well, that's good and fine when the teams are going good. When the teams are going bad, at 50 off, they don't even want it. On top of that, you had the Amazon factor. On top of that, the warm weather really, really killed us. We're a needs-based business. And when you get warm weather in the wintertime, no one's buying outerwear. They're not buying boots. They're not buying sweatshirts. We had no snow. Not having any snow compared to a big snowstorms the year before, no one's buying boots. People buy for need with our customers because they don't have a lot of money. We cater mostly to the blue-collar worker. And so as a result, business got soft. 2020, we hit a wall. Cash got tight, and we had to file bankruptcy.
I've got a question from a student. Isaiah wants to know, what plans does Modell's have now?
Well, for the next 45 days, we're going to be liquidating the stores. By September 1, we will no longer be operating. There'll be an auction with the leases at the end of the month and in August. And Modell's will be history after 131 years. We've decided that, with the coronavirus, with, social distancing, you can have to only let half the people in the stores. The model doesn't work unless you're on a percentage rent deal where you're paying 5% rent to every landlord. It's impossible to exist in this environment. The Walmarts, the Targets, they got, the great operators, big checkbooks behind them, and they're fighting the battle. So we're into a whole different world today.
What do you think the future holds for sports retail as an industry?
I think it's going to have its issues. I mean, when you think about it, you probably have maybe 4 regional players in the country. You got Academy in Texas. You got Big 5 on the West Coast. You've got Dunham's in the Midwest, and you got Olympia in the Northeast. That's it. And then you got Dick's Sporting Goods. So customers don't have a lot of options. We had 157 stores at one time in the Northeast. We were easy to shop within a couple of miles of each other. We were always about convenience and price. And when you take that away and you're left with the Amazons, you'll see Amazon picking up a lot of the slack.
Now, for the 2018-2019 school year, the National Federation of High School Associations reported the first decline in the number of kids playing high school sports in 30 years. If fewer people play sports, what does that mean? What do you think that means for the future of the sporting goods industry and for sports in America?
It's very tough. It all started with the computers. Kids, they'd rather be home. They play these war games, videos. They'll be on the computer. They'll be talking to their friends. You got to get out there and play, and that's the problem. And then when you look at the health factor, right? The concussion factor in football. So football sales have been declining for the last 7 years. You look at lacrosse, stabilized, but again, you could still get injured. And now with the lack of funds in the school system, you're going to see a lot of people lack of, smaller participation, and it's going to create a problem.
Yeah, Stanford announced a week or so ago that they were cutting from 33 competitive sports down to 19. So, okay, if you don't grow up wanting to play that sport or thinking that there's a future for playing that sport, then maybe you don't play the sport. I've got a question regarding the shutdown of sports that we're in the midst of. What do you think's going to happen as a result of this? What do you got a crystal ball here? What does the future hold for sports when they return?
So they're going to return, and I pray to God I'm wrong, but I think every sport is going to end up either getting shut down or NFL might not even start. When you see what happens with 38 states, they're back on the rise with this coronavirus. New York has played it really smart. They played it by the metrics. But at the end of the day, you got to keep people healthy. And, unless people feel like they could go out, playing sports without fans, I just don't see it. I was watching a Japanese baseball game. That's how desperate I am for sports. Besides watching the Mets win in 1986 about 10 times.
I watched that too. I watched every game.
But you see, they have phony fans like on the screen. It looks like people are sitting there, so you get the excitement of it. But it's going to be really tough. I think 2020 is going to be a year of transition. I applaud all the commissioners for doing everything humanly possible to try to start up the game. But at the end of the day, it's all about the health and welfare of the fans and the health and welfare of the players. And, I hope I'm wrong, but it's, this thing is so crazy. We don't know where it's coming from.
You mentioned computers, and during this shutdown of live sports, there has been a huge surge in subscriptions for Netflix. Subscriptions for Disney Plus are up over 57 million. Yesterday, NBC debuted their Peacock subscription service. If people get out of the habit of watching sports for entertainment and they subscribe to these other services, there's a real possibility that fewer fans might return even when the sports come back strong.
I think people are starving. People are starving for sports.
Okay, good.
When you look at golf, and it was the biggest broadcast, the biggest numbers they've ever put on, ever, because people are so desperate, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope they get started. I'm looking forward to next Thursday night, Yankees at the Nationals, A-Rod on TV on ESPN, right? You're an ESPN guy. So, those things, I'm looking forward to it, and God willing, the season will continue. How I'm going to feel, what I keep asking myself is, if the Yankees win the World Series or the Mets or the Phillies, or am I going to have the same excitement that a real 162-game season is? Or do we feel like, you know what, there's a big asterisk? Who knows? I think once we all get caught up into the playoffs, it's going to be business as usual and it'll be back to where it was. I just pray that the players are healthy.
Yes, if the players stay healthy, there are real possibilities for very interesting stories that could develop, because in a 60-game season, you might have some players near the end of those 60 games who are batting over 400. You might have a pitcher who's on a real hot streak, and maybe you're like the Ron Guidry season, goes 20, only loses 2 games or something like that over 60 games. So hopefully there'll be some compelling stories that wouldn't be possible in a 162-game season that will generate more interest. That's what I'm hoping for.
I think what's the only good thing about a short season is that everybody's in play. Think about what happened to the Nationals last year, right? They were horrible up until June. They had a disastrous record, and they wound up winning the World Series. Well, you don't have that time frame now. You got to get up and running. But without the players, without spring training, now they call it summer training or whatever. But without that, I'm concerned about the risk the players are to be injured, not being in a really good shape. So it's interesting times, but I love the fact that every sport, even like the USTA, they're doing everything humanly possible without fans to put on the show. And you know what? TV is going to be strong again. People are going to watch it. They're going to be excited about it. They need something different than hearing about how many deaths do we have today and what's the hospitalizations look like. Sports is a great distraction. It was great for 9/11. It was great for every time the country went into turmoil one way or another. It always brought people together, and it's a great distraction.
Television is starved for it, and it's very interesting having worked in TV. It makes me think back to 1960. I've done some research. I teach a course about the Super Bowl. And Roone Arledge was the one who put the American Football League on the air for the first time in 1960. And they didn't have very many fans at all in the stands. And he developed what they called the AFL coverage, where you angled the cameras so that you never saw the stands. The top of the frame was always the opposite sideline, and they didn't even follow the flight of the ball. When it was a kickoff, you'd see the guy kick the ball, and then they'd cut to the guy who's going to catch it, so you wouldn't be panning across empty stands. So I'm thinking that television might actually adapt to this new reality, and we might see a little bit of a different coverage where the lack of fans is less of a factor in our visual.
Right. When you look at the business model for a lot of these sports teams, fans, particularly where you don't have huge contracts, like the NFL, they have such a huge contract. Yeah, we like to get fans in the stadium, but it's not as contingent on baseball where they're relying on concessions and food and ticket prices and parking and all those, kind of things. I think if the networks, and it's easy for me to say, being an outsider looking in, I would try to make it as experiential as possible. I mean, I would take the fans into the locker room at halftime and hear the football coaches talking about what is going on. I'd mic up the dugout, things where they normally wouldn't be exposed to. We're in different times. How do we attract more eyeballs and really make it incredible? I mean, there's nothing better like on Sunday when you hear the NFL coach, but it's usually like a 15-second clip. Here's the game ball. You guys did great. I really want to hear what goes on at halftime. Now, is that a disadvantage to the other team if they hear? Who cares? You know what? At the end of the day, it's about fan engagement. And today with social distancing, and who knows when it's going to happen, to get back to where we were, if we ever will, TV and giving fans the access that they normally wouldn't have by being home.
I think that's brilliant. And I'm going to ask our students to, as sports come back without fans in the stands, to make some notes, track what it is what's being done differently and what would make the experience better for you. Because I think you're right. If you changed the tenor of the telecast, where it's not just looking down on it, but it's listening in, and it's going off the field, it's going into the dugout, it's going into the locker rooms. I think that's brilliant.
Don't you love when they mic up on like the Sunday night games, the manager of a baseball team, and they're talking about the strategy? I mean, how about if we did it for 9 innings? What are the guys talking about? Even if you got to bleep some stuff out in the dugout. But that's what kids want to aspire to. That's what really makes it real, as opposed to, how can I get involved in a sport where there's no fans around? Fan engagement, experiential. Look, the same things happen to retail. The people that are delivering great experiences are winning.
And you know what? When you said that, it made me think that if people watching, if youngsters watching, if this is their immersion into the sport, and oh my goodness, all this is going on, and these are the cool things that are being said, and these are the factors behind what I'm seeing on that actually could create new fans, which would be very positive for the industry.
Yeah, I mean,
We were talking about, go ahead.
no, and that's important. I mean, every commissioner, the biggest initiative is how do we get young kids involved with sports, watching, participating? What are those things that we can do? Because, you know, as the fan base dies off, you know, you got to bring in that new fresh blood into the game and get them excited about it.
Right. Major League Baseball's their median age for television viewers is 57, and that's up 4 years over the past decade. And you know, that means as many 77-year-olds are watching baseball as 37-year-olds. And that's not something that is going to be sustainable, you know. So you're right, bringing in younger fans is the goal of each of these leagues.
For sure.
We were talking about sports participation, and a little bit of a drop in high school participation. What do you think, is there anything that the sports industry can do to help promote participation and promote that outdoor activity?
Unfortunately, we really don't have a strong lobbying group in the sports industry. Like, I sit on the board of National Retail Federation, and they do a phenomenal job really getting involved in retail. Right now, the biggest thing with them right now, how do we mandate that every customer walking into any retail establishment must wear a mask? Forget about it's not being mandated by the White House or by the governors, and they're taking that leadership position on. The same thing has to happen where they should go. There's, you know, NSGA, which is the Sporting Goods Association, SGMA rather, should go to all the different commissioners and have them subsidize and have them come up with a program to get kids involved. Like, why isn't there Little League Day in March? First Saturday in March, last Saturday in March, every Little League celebrates. Like, how do you bring that to life? How do you celebrate playing football or lacrosse day or whatever? All the monies that the leagues made from royalties, from licensing, from TV revenues, how do they give it back to the local communities? And it might be as much as supplying equipment for the kids or helping defer their cost, or how do we get the government to give them tax benefits that if I pay, I get a tax credit. There's got to be creative, out-of-the-box thinking to get more kids involved, as opposed to saying, oh, it's just on the decline, and let's see this thing go down the tubes.
Are there growth areas in sports retail? Which sports are growing, or where's the greatest potential?
Fitness. People, particularly now, being home, I mean, you can't find a hand weight anywhere in the country. You can't find any of those things. Look at Peloton and all the different companies that are emerging, Soul Cycle, you know, Equinox, what they're doing with gyms. I'm out in the Hamptons and I see Anderson is putting studios out starting 7 in the morning on the lawn, which they social distancing, you know, coming up with different classes. I think it's brilliant. People that think out of the box, as opposed to, you know, putting their head between the legs, say, oh my God, this has been a disaster, It's no different than the restaurant business. I'm on the board of the New York City Tourism Board. And I was telling Fred Dixon, the president, I go, listen, even though I'm not in the restaurant business, and I know Cuomo doesn't want to open it up, the governor doesn't want to open up in-place eating because we can't police it. I go, well, how about if we have the customers police it? If tables aren't 6 foot apart, if they're on 2 seats at a bar apart, anybody that catches them, turn them in and they get a free dinner. Turn somebody in, you get a free dinner for the whole table. Okay, now you've got every cop in every restaurant in New York, and we're going to see if they're going to do it. But again, it's just thinking out of the box and coming up with creative ways.
What suggestions would you have for students and young entrepreneurs who want to pursue a career in the sports industry?
You know, I probably get more calls on this subject than any other call that I get from friends and saying, listen, you know, my friend wants to work, my son wants to intern at the Yankees. They want to intern at the Nets. They want to Everyone looks at sports as being, oh my God, I can't believe it. But unfortunately, there's so few slots available. And they mostly start at low entry. So it all starts with what's important to them. To me, it's about the veins, the passion. If you have the passion for sports, the money will eventually come. If you're doing it for the money up front, you're going to be miserable. And it's going to take time. Look at Robert Manfred, right? He was an attorney, and he's now commissioner. Adam Silver, NBA commissioner, went through the same ranks, trained under David Stern, the most brilliant marketing guy. So it's all about what's important to me. I would say do what you love to do. Do what you love to do, and then the money will come after. And study those teams, study the culture, study the history. If you want to work for the Yankees, study all the different things they do, all the community stuff that they do. Study the things that you're talking the same language. So when you go in for an interview, you seem like you're part of the company already, as opposed to not knowing, I want to join a company, but I have no idea. What are the values? What are the morals? What are the things that are important to them? Where is the focus?
When you think about it, it's really like doing your homework for, this is a job that I want. And so much information is available online. I mean, you can go on, if you're being interviewed tomorrow by a company, you can go online today and read their mission statement, read their latest news releases. What have they done? What are they changing? There's a real
public company. Read the 10K. There were so many things. Even if you say you want to be in marketing, I would buy every marketing book at Barnes and Noble, on Amazon. Okay, and that's what I did. I read over 1,000 books since high school, all business, not one novel. Everyone was a business book. But I wanted to study who the smartest leaders were. Jack Welch's book I read. Jack was a dear friend who ran GE. I read his books 3 times. Harvey McKay, who was beyond brilliant, just came out with a new book, which I strongly recommend to the group. That's fabulous. That again, it teaches an entrepreneurial things. It teaches you how to negotiate, how to manage, how to lead, how to interview. All those different things that sometimes the classroom setting might not teach you. That's so valuable going forward in any business that you approach.
There are certain sacrifices that you have to make if you're going into the sports business, because sports is played, the big games are played on nights and weekends. So, I'll mention that to students is, you're signing up for a life of working nights and weekends, and suddenly it's, well, wait a minute, and when you talked about what's in your veins, is either you've got the passion that'll sustain you through that and drive you to look forward to every night and weekend, or, do something else, right? I mean, that should be your recommendation, right?
Absolutely. Because if you want to work for Madison Square Garden and they've got the Knicks and the Rangers and the WNBA, you're going to be working every night, 52 weeks a year, And I think if you're a girl, you better make sure your husband knows. If you're a guy, you better make sure your future wife knows. Because what you're signing up for a lot of time away from the family. Brett Yormark, who was the CEO of the Nets, used to work with NASCAR, probably the brightest guy in this industry. This guy, I would see him at every game. And at night, I would see him. It looks like he just got out of the shower and he's working 15 hours a day, up at 4 a.m, working out, has his meetings at 7, and then he has to stay till 10, 11 o'clock till the game's over. I mean, that is commitment. I couldn't do that. I would go crazy. As much as I love sports, you know what? It's the balance. You got to be able to balance quality time, family time, and then work time. But when you're signed up for the sports business, you got to be ready. Nights, weekends, it's tough. And they're long, and the games are long. When you're Mike Tuciani, the vice president for the Yankees, and you're in the World Series, those games are ending 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and he's in the office at 8 a.m, and you got travel time, you got to get in there. it really burns you out.
What advice would you give yourself if you were the person just graduating from college now? Knowing what you know, what advice would you give your younger self?
I would write down, what are the things that really excite me? What are those things? There are companies, and unfortunately, the guy that I used passed away a year ago, but you could go and take an aptitude test. You could probably go online and you could take an aptitude test. They ask you a series of questions and it will tell you where your strengths are that you might not know about it. You know what? Based on the way you answer the question, you're super creative. You're super technical. You're super aggressive. You should be in this field. And, see if that matches up to your DNA. But to me, again, it goes about what makes you tick. What do you love? It's got to be a labor of love. I always tell people, I never worked one day in my life, because when you love what you do, it's not work. It's a labor of love. And that's what you have to aspire to do. And you got to be educated. You got to be really educated on the subject, on the area. And like you said, you could go online. You go the old-fashioned way, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You go on TED Talks. There's some great TED Talks. You know what? Rubenstein, who's on Bloomberg on Sunday mornings. Every Sunday, he's interviewing another CEO. And it's just incredible. When you learn so much about questions being asked and how you become leaders. And that's how you learn. It's all about learning. When you learn, it's like a tree, right? You got to give a tree water. You got to give a tree water so it could grow. You don't put water on trees, they eventually die. Same thing with knowledge. If you're continually to grow and you're learning, you're growing as an individual, professionally and personally. When you stop learning and I love to learn every day. I love to hang around people that make me smarter on a different subject. And I watch a lot of TV, but I only watch TV that I could learn from. And that's how I would absolutely, I do it with my sons every day. Every day they get a business lesson from me. Here's what happened. What would you do? Here's what I did. And that's the kind of feedback that you need to get on a daily basis.
You mentioned asking questions. How important is curiosity for success?
Oh, why? Tell me why. It's not, you shouldn't look at it. If I ask you a question, they're going to think I'm not smart. If I ask you a question, they're going to think the next guy's. To me, when you don't ask the question, that's a problem. Constantly ask questions. My father would not let my brother and I go into the business unless we worked for another company for 3 years. And so I went to work for A&S, Abraham and Strauss, as an assistant buyer in women's coats. And I remember my boss, Peter Mage, who eventually became president of TJ Maxx. And he always said to me, always constantly ask questions. Never stop. Why? Why? Explain it to me. Why? I don't understand. What do you really mean by that? That's how you learn. You learn by that, and you learn from making mistakes. As long as you don't make them twice. The same mistake.
Now, was there a mistake that you learned from that changed the direction of how you approach something? Do you have an example of a mistake that taught you a really valuable lesson?
Yep. It was in 1987. It's in my book. I went up to Spalding. I'm standing in the lobby with my buyer, and I'm listening to the telephone operator, Gert, answer the phone. And so while I'm waiting for Jack Lacey, the vice president, it's back in 1987, 86, 87. I'm listening to the telephone operator. I go, my God, you're so enthusiastic. Did you just start this position? He goes, start this position? This is my 23rd year. I said, 23 years? And is today your birthday, your anniversary? I love working for the company. Why? Because they get me involved. Give me an example. You see this telephone system? I picked it out. Do you know that we sold more golf balls this past year than any other year in the history of Spalding? Do you know that we just signed up another 10-year deal with the NBA for our basketballs. Now, this was the telephone operator. So Jack Lacey picks me up and I go, Jack, forget about the merchandise. I need to understand about Gert. What makes it tick? I need to understand about the culture. Tell me about the culture at Spalding. He goes, oh, that's Von Rist. He's the human resource guy. What's a human resource guy? He's the guy that puts all these programs together. I want to meet with him. He can't. He's with labor negotiations all day. I go, Gert, call me a cab. I'm going back to the airport. When Von's ready for me, I'll come back to Boston. He goes, you're kidding. Gert, what time is the cab going to be? I'm taking the next flight out of here. Anyway, met Von for lunch. Starts explaining the whole situation. You got to make sure that people are motivated, then make sure they're incentivized. You got to make sure the incentive program matches the description of the job. You got to install management by objectives, MBO. I go, what's MBO? Well, you give them 3 different things you want them to focus in on, and you put percentages on it. So if you say you want to drive profits, half the bonus is in profits, 25% is in sales. Anyway, oh, great, I'm installing MBO. I didn't even have an organizational structure. I didn't even know who reported to who, yet I wanted to rush out and put this MBO in, which would have been a disaster. So always think, test, and learn. Test and learn, always.
I've got another student question here. Jordan asks, what did it take to keep Modell's running from generation to generation? And how did it change and adapt to the world and technology?
Great question. Great question. So we started out in 1889. We had a stand by the waterfront by Cortlandt Street. And as the ships were coming in, Morris Modell, my great-grandfather in 1889, would sell hats and accessories and gloves. And he had a son, Henry. And Henry went from 1 store, took us to 4 stores in the Army and Navy surplus business. So he was trading in those days, Army and Navy surplus, brilliant marketing guy, a real P.T. Barnum, really loved the camera. Everywhere he went, he had a camera chasing him. Very involved with politics, knew all the mayors and the police department and the fire department, because you want to make sure, again, when you get back to the community, you were arm in arm with those departments. And then, so we went from accessories to surplus to my father got involved in the business, the 3rd generation. He went into the discount business in 1954. We were in business before Kmart, Walmart, Target. They weren't even born yet. And so my father took a concept of getting the best operators under one roof, under Modell Shoppers World, get the best beauty aid guy, the best menswear, best women's wear, best footwear, best drug department guy, best sporting goods operator. Put all these guys under one roof, and it became a discount store, which eventually Walmart, Kmart, Target followed. From there, my brother and I got involved in the business, and we said, listen, we can't subsidize these guys anymore. These guys aren't as powerful as they were with Walmart, Kmart, Target, Sears, all going after us. So we decided to get rid of the discount business and then open up and focus strictly on sporting goods. And then we upgraded our stores. So it's all about evolution and change. Change when you don't have to. Keep changing to make sure you're ahead of the curve. But the most important thing is whoever serves the customer first, the best, always wins. That's why Amazon, they understand the customer. Their customer intelligence is unbelievable. You buy a book, they're already giving you 10 other books like that to buy. You're buying a ball glove, they're offering you glove oil to buy. So they understand the nuances of dealing with the customers. And in terms of technology, unfortunately, we did not keep up with technology. Technology became really, really expensive. And when you're going through difficult times and you're a privately held company and you don't have access to capital by floating issues, it puts a restraints on how much money you could spend when and where. And Dick's, I got to give him a tremendous amount of credit. Eddie Stack, big competitor of ours, he invested early. He invested a lot in technology on his website. You know, right now he's doing almost 15% of his online business, which is incredible. We were doing like 4. And so, but it takes a lot of money and energy. And again, that was one of the things that we knew we'd have to spend so much money that we just couldn't, we'd always be behind the 8 ball.
Could you close with just a couple words of advice for our sport management students as to what might spell success for them in the future, and just a couple of things that would make a difference for them as they move forward?
So I would say, in talking to the students, figure out what you really want to do, right? Saying you want to be in the sports business is really generic. You want to be an agent, okay? If you want to be an agent, I'd say study Scott Boras, the best agent on the planet. I met Scott about 10 years ago, and he was telling me how he analyzes his players. And he started off, he showed me A-Rod's book, where A-Rod, when he was in elementary school, and the articles written about him, and he put together a whole program. So what I would do is I would say, study who are the best in the field you want to be. You want to be an agent? Study Scott Boras, study the Levinsons, aces, the people that, and understand what makes them tick and why are they successful. And, go online and get as much information as you can and study any area that you want. Who is the number 1? Who's number 2? And what makes them successful? And now how could you be better than them and build a better mousetrap to be successful?
Well, I want to especially thank you for joining us today, Mitchell Modell, the CEO of Modell Sporting Goods. Thanks for sharing your expertise and your time with us. And also special thanks to our Sports Business Council Committee. It's been a great morning, and thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.